Chapter 10. Letter, Dr. Seward, to Honorable Arthur Holmwood. My dear Art, my news today is not so good. Lucy this morning has gone back a bit. There is, however, one good thing that has arisen from it. Mrs. Westenra was naturally anxious concerning Lucy, and has consulted me professionally about her. I took advantage of the opportunity and told her that my master, Van Helsing, the great specialist, has come to stay with me, and that I would put her in his charge conjointly with myself. So now we can come and go without alarming her unduly, for a shock to her would mean sudden death, and this, in Lucy's weak condition, might be disastrous for her. We are hedged in with difficulties, all of us, my poor old fellow, but please God, we shall come through all of it all right. If any need, I shall write, so that I do not hear from me. Take it for granted that I am simply waiting for news. In haste. Yours ever, John Seward. Dr. Seward's Diary. 7th September. First thing Van Helsing said to me when we met at Liverpool Street was, "Have you said anything to our young friend, the lover of her?" "No," I said. I waited until I had seen you, as I said in my telegram. I wrote him a letter simply telling him that you were coming, as Mrs. Westenra was not so well, and that I should let her know if I need him. "Right, my friends," he said. "Quite right. Better he not know as yet. Perhaps he shall never know. I pray so. But if be needed, then he shall know all. And, my good friend John, let me caution you. You deal with the madmen. All men are mad in some way or another. Inasmuch as you deal discreetly with your madmen, so deal with God's madmen, too. The rest of the words. Tell not your madmen what you do, nor why you do it. You simply tell them not what you think. So you shall keep knowledge in its place, where it may rest, where it may gather its kind around it and breed. You and I shall keep as yet what we know here and here." He touched on the heart and on the forehead, and touched myself in the same way. "I have 4 thoughts myself at present. Later I shall unfold it to you." "Why not now?" I asked. It may do some good. We may arrive at some decision." He stopped and looked at me and said, "My friend Jean, when the corn is grown, even before it is ripened, while the milk of its mother earth is still in him, the sunshine has not yet begun to paint him with his gold, the husbandman, he pull the ear and rub it between his rough hands and blow away all the green chaff, and I says to you, look, he's good corn. He will make good crop when time comes." I did not see the application and told him so. For reply, he reached over and took my ear in his hand and pulled it playfully, as he used to long ago during lectures, and said, "The good husbandman tell you that then, because he knows, but not till then. But you do not find that good husbandmen dig his planted corn to see if it grow. That is for the children who play at husbandry, and not for those who take it as of the work of their life. See you now, friend John? I have sown my corn, and nature of her work to do in making it sprout, if he sprout at all. There is some promise, and I wait till the ears begin to swell." He broke off, for evidently he saw that I understood, and then he went on, and very gravely, "You are always a very careful student, and your case book was ever more full than the rest. You were only student then. Now you are master, and I trust that good habit has not failed. Remember, my friend, that knowledge is stronger than memory, and we should not trust the weaker. Even if you have not kept good the practice, let me tell you that this case of our dear Miss is one that may be, mind, I say may be, of such interest to us and others that all the rest may not make him kick the beam, as your people say. Take then good note of it. Nothing is too small. I consult you. Put it down in record, even your doubts and surmises. Hereafter, it may be of interest to you when you see how it true your guess was. We learn from failure, not from success. When I described Lucy's symptoms, the same as before, but infinitely more marked, he looked very grave and said nothing. He took with him a bag in which there were several instruments and drugs. The ghastly paraphernalia of our beneficial trade, as he once called in one of his lectures, the equipment of a professor of the healing craft. When we were shown in, Mrs. Westenra met us. She was alarmed, but not nearly as much as I'd expect to find her. Nature, in one of her beneficial moods, had ordained that even death had some antidote to its own terrors. Here, in a case where any shock might prove fatal, matters are so ordered that, from some cause or another, the things are not personal. Even the terrible change in her daughter, for whom she is so attached, did not seem to reach her. It may be something like the way Dame Nature gathers around a foreign body an envelope of some insensitive tissue which can protect from evil that which would otherwise harm it. If this be an ordered selfishness, then we should pause before we condemn anyone for the vice of egotism, for there may be a deeper root for its causes than we have knowledge of. I used my knowledge of this phase of spiritual pathology, and laid down a rule that she should not be present when Lucy, or think her illness more than absolutely required. She assented readily, so readily that I saw again the hand of nature fighting for life. Van Helsing and I were shown up to Lucy's room. If I was shocked when I saw her yesterday, I was horrified when I saw her today. She was ghastly, chalkily pale. The red seems to have gone even from her lips and gums, and the bones in her face stood out prominently. Her breathing was painful to see and hear. Van Helsing's face grew set as marble, and his eyes converged until they were almost touched over his nose. Lucy lay motionless and did not seem to have the strength to speak, for a while we were all silent. Then Van Helsing beckoned to me, and we went gently out of the room. The instant we closed the door, he stepped quickly along the passage to the next room, which was open. Then he pulled me quickly in with him and closed the door. "Mein Gott," he said, "this is dreadful. There is no time to be lost. She will die, for sheer want of blood, to keep her heart action, should it be. There must be a transfusion of blood at once. Is it you or me?" "I am younger and stronger, Professor. It must be me." "Then get ready at once. I will bring my bag, and then I am prepared." I went downstairs with him. As we were going there was a knock at the hall door. When we reached the hall, the maid had just opened the door, and Arthur stepped in quickly. He rushed up to me, saying in an eager whisper, "Jack, I was so anxious. I could read between the lines of your letter, and have been in agony. The dad was better, so I ran down to hear for myself. Is that the gentleman, Dr. Van Helsing? I'm so thankful to you, sir, for coming." When first the professor's eyes lit upon him, he had been angry at his interruption at such a time, but now as he looked at his stalwart proportions and recognized the strong young manhood which seemed to emanate from him, his eyes gleamed. Without a pause, he said to me, gravely as he held out his hand, "Sir, you have come in time. You are the lover of our dear miss. She is bad, very, very bad. Nay, my child, do not go like that." For he suddenly grew pale and sat down in the chair almost faintingly. "You are to help her. You can do more than any that live, and your courage is the best help." "What can I do?" asked Arthur hoarsely. "Tell me, and I shall do it. My life is hers, and I would give the last drop of blood in my body for her." The professor had a strong, humorous side, and I could from old knowledge detect a trace of its origin in his answer. "Ah, my young sir, I do not ask so much of that. Not the last." "What shall I do?" There was a fire in his eyes, and his open nostrils quivered with intent. Van Helsing slapped him on the shoulder. "Come," he said. "You are a man, and it is a man we want. You are better than me, and better than my friend John." Arthur looked bewildered, and the professor went on explaining in a kindly way. "Young Missy is very bad, very bad. She wants blood, and blood she must have or die. My friend John and I have consulted, and we are to perform what we call a transfusion of blood, to transfer from full veins to one that in the empty veins which pine for him. John was to give his blood, as he is more young and strong than me. Here Arthur took his hand and wrung it hard in silence. But now you are here. You are more good than us, old and young, for toil much in the world of thought. Our nerves are not so calm, and our blood not so bright as yours. Arthur turned to me and said, "If you only knew how gladly I would die for her, you would understand." He stopped, with a sort of choking in his voice. "Ha, good boy," said Van Helsing. "In that not so far off you will be happy that you have done all you can for your love. Come, and be silent. You shall kiss her once before it's done, but then you must go. And you must leave at my sign. Say no word to madam. You know how it is with her. There be no shock. Acknowledge this would be one. Come." We went up to Lucy's room. Arthur, by direction, remained outside. Lucy turned her head and looked at us, but said nothing. She was not asleep, but she was simply too weak to make the effort. Her eyes spoke to us. That was all. Dr. Van Helsing took some things from his bag and laid them out on the little table out of sight. Then he mixed a narcotic and coming over to the bed, said cheerily, "Now, miss, here is your medicine. Drink it off, like a good child. See? I lift you so you have swallowed. Easy, yes?" She had made the effort with success. It astonished me how long the drug took to act. This, in fact, marked the extent of her weakness. Time seemed endless until sleep began to flicker in her eyelids. At last, however, the narcotic began to manifest its potency, and she fell into a deep sleep. When the professor was satisfied, he called Arthur into the room and bade him strip off his coat, and then added, "You may take that one kiss whilst I bring over the table. Friend John, help to me." So neither of us looked while he bent over her. Van Helsing turned to me and said, "He is so young and strong, and of blood so pure that we need not defibrillate him." Then with swiftness, but with absolute method, Van Helsing performed the operation. As the transfusion went on, with something like life seemed to come back into poor Lucy's cheeks, and through Arthur's growing pallor, the joy in his face seemed absolutely to shine. After a bit, I began to grow anxious, for the loss of blood was telling on Arthur. Strong man as he was, it gave me an idea of the terrible strain of Lucy's system must have undergone, for what weakened Arthur only partially restored her. But the professor's face was set, and he stood, watch in hand, and his eyes fixated on the patient and now Arthur. I could hear my own heartbeat. Presently, he said in a soft voice, Do not stir an instant. It is enough. You attend him." I would look to her. When all was over, I could see how much Arthur was weakened. I dressed the wound and took his arm to bring him away. When Van Helsing spoke, without turning round, the man seemed to have eyes in the back of his head. "The brave lover, I think, deserves another kiss, which he shall have presently." And as he finished his operation, he adjusted the pillow of the patient's head. As he did seem, the narrow black veil band, which she seemed to always wear around her throat, buckled with the old-fashioned diamond buckle which her lover had given her, was dragged up a little and showed a red mark on her throat. Arthur did not notice it, but I could hear the deep hiss of indrawn breath, which was one of Van Helsing's ways of portraying emotion. He said nothing at the moment, and turned to me, saying, "Now take down our brave young lover, give him of the port wine, and tell him to lie down for a while. He must then go home and rest, sleep much, and eat much, so that he may be recruited for what he has given so much to his love. He must not stay here. Hold a moment. I may take it, sir, that you are anxious of a result, then bring it with you in all the ways the operation is successful. You have saved her life this time, and you can go home and rest easy and mind that all as it should be. Tell her that I shall tell her when she is all well. She shall love you none the less for what you have done. Goodbye." When Arthur had gone, I went back to the room. Lucy was sleeping gently, but her breathing was stronger. I could see the counterpane move as her breast heaved. By the window sat Van Helsing, looking at her intently. the velvet band covered around the red mark. I asked the professor in a whisper, "What do you make about that mark about her throat?" "What do you make of it?" "I have not examined it yet," I answered, and then and there proceeded to loosen the band. Just over the external jugular vein there were 2 punctures, not large, but not wholesome looking. There was no signs of disease, but the edges were white and worn, as if with some trepitation. It was at once occurred to me that this wound, or whatever it was, might be the means of that manifested loss of blood. But I abandoned the idea as soon as it formed, for such a thing could not be. The whole bed would have been drenched in scarlet with blood, which the girl must have lost to leave such a pallor as she had before the transfusion. "Well?" said Van Helsing. "Well," I said, "I can make nothing of it." The professor stood up. "I must go back to Amsterdam tonight," he said. "There are books and things from which I want. You must remain here all the night, and you must not let your sight pass from her." "Shall I have a nurse?" I asked. "We are the best nurses, you and I. You will keep watch all night. See that she is well fed and nothing disturbs her. You must not sleep all night. Later on we can sleep, you and I. I shall be back as soon as possible, and we may begin." "May begin?" I said. "What on earth do you mean?" "We shall see," he answered as he hurried out. He came back a moment later and put his head inside the door and said, with a warning finger held up, "Remember, she is your charge. If you leave her and harm befall, you shall not sleep easy hereafter." Dr. Seward's diary continued. 8th September. I sat up with Lucy all night. The opiate worked itself towards the dusk, and she waked naturally. She looked different, and looked a different being from what she had been before the operation. Her spirits were even good, and she was full of a happy vivacity, but I could see evidences of the absolute prostration that she had undergone. When I had told Mrs. Westenra that Dr. Van Helsing had directed us that I should sit up with her, she almost pooh-poohed the idea, pointing at her daughter's renewed strength and excellent spirits. I was firm, however, and made preparations for my long vigil. When her maid had prepared her for the night, I came in, having in the meantime had supper, and took a seat on the bedside. She did not in any way make objection, but looked at me gratefully when I caught her eye. After a long spell, she seemed sinking off to sleep, but with an effort seemed to pull herself together and shook it off. This was repeated several times, with great effort and with shorter pauses as the time moved on. It was apparent that she did not want to sleep, so I tackled the subject once again. "You do not want to sleep?" "No. I am afraid." "Afraid to go to sleep? Why so? It is a boon for all that we all crave for." Not if you were like me. If sleep was to you a presage of horror." "A presage of horror? What on earth do you mean?" "I don't know. Oh, I don't know. But that is what is so terrible. All this weakness comes to me in sleep, until I dread the very thought of it." "But, my dear girl, you may sleep tonight. I am here watching you, and I can promise nothing will happen." "I can trust you." She seized the opportunity and said, "I promise you that if I see any evidence of bad dreams, I shall wake you." You will? Oh, will you really? How good of me. Then I shall sleep." And almost with a word she gave a sigh of relief and sank back asleep. All night long I watched her. She never stirred, but slept on and on into a deep, tranquil, life-giving, health-giving sleep. Her lips were slightly parted, and her breast rose and fell with the regularity of a pendulum. There was a smile on her face, and it was evident that no bad dreams had come to disturb her peace of mind. In the early morning the maid came, and I left her in her care and took myself back home, for I was anxious about many things. I sent a short wire to Van Helsing and to Arthur, telling him of the excellent result of the operation. My own work, with its manifold areas, took me all day to clear off. It was dark when I was able to inquire about my Zovas's patient. The report was good. She had been quiet for the rest of the past day and night. A telegram from Van Helsing at Amsterdam, whilst I had dinner, suggested I should be at Hillingham tomorrow, as it might be at hand, and stating that he would be leaving by the night mail and would join me early in the morning. 9th September. I was pretty tired and worn out when I got to Hillingham. For 2 nights I had hardly a wink of sleep, and my brain was beginning to feel the numbness which marks cerebral exhaustion. Lucy was up in cheerful spirits. When she shook hands with me, she looked sharply at my face and said, "No sitting up tonight for you. You're worn out." "I am quite well again. Indeed I am, and if there is to be any sitting up, it is I who will sit up with you." I would not argue at the point, but went and had my supper. Lucy came with me and enlivened me with her charming presence. I made an excellent meal and had a couple of glasses of the more than excellent port. Then Lucy took me upstairs and showed me a room next to her own, with a cozy fire burning. "Now," she said, "you must stay here. I shall leave the door open, and my door open too. You can lie on the sofa, for I know nothing would induce any of you doctors to go to bed whilst there's a patient above the horizon. If I want anything, I shall call out, and you can come to me at once." I could not but acquiesce, for I was quote-unquote dog-tired, and could not have sat up if I tried. So, on her renewing her promise to call me if she should want anything, I lay on the sofa and forgot about everything else. Lucy Westenra's diary. 9th September. I feel so happy tonight. I've been so miserably weak that to be able to think and move about is like feeling sunshine after a long spell of east wind on the steel sky. Somehow Arthur feels very, very close to me. I seem to feel his presence warm about me. I suppose it is that sickness and weakness of selfish things, and turn our inner eyes and sympathies on ourselves, whilst health and strength gave love rein. But in thought and feeling he can wander where he wills. I know where my thoughts are. If only Arthur knew. My dear, your ears must tingle as you sleep, as mine do waking. Oh, the blissful rest of last night! How I slept with that dear, good Dr. Seward watching me. And tonight I shall not fear sleep, since he is close at hand and within call. Thank everybody for being so good to me. Thank God. Thank good night, Arthur. Dr. Seward's diary. 10th September. I was conscious of the professor's hand on my head and started to awaken in a second. That is one of the things we must learn in an asylum at any rate. "And how is our patient?" "Well, when I left her, or rather when she left me," I answered. "Come, let us see," he said, and together we went into the room. The blind was down, and I went over to raise it gently, whilst Van Helsing stepped with his careful cat-like tread over to the bed. As I raised the blind in the morning and sunlight flooded into the room, I heard the professor's low hiss of inspiration, and knowing its rarity, a dreadful fear shot through my heart. As I passed over, he moved back in his exclamation of horror. "Gott in mein Himmel!" It needed no enforcement of his agonized face. He raised his hand and pointed to the bed. His iron face was drawn and ashen white. I felt my knees grow as they trembled. There, on the bed, seemingly in a swoon, lay poor Lucy, more horribly white and wan-looking than ever. Even the lips were white, and the gums seemed to have sunken back from the teeth, as we could see sometimes in the corpse after a prolonged illness. Van Helsing raised his foot to stamp in anger, but the instinct of his life and all the years of his habit stood to him, and he put it down again softly. "Quickly," he said, "bring the brandy." I flew into the dining room and returned with the decanter. We wetted the poor girl's lips with it, and together we rubbed palm and wrist and heart. He felt her heart, and after a few moments of agonizing suspense said, "It is not too late. It beats, though but feebly. All of our work is undone. We must begin again. There is no young Arthur here now. I have to call upon myself this time, friend Jean." And as he spoke, he was dipping into his bag and producing instruments for transfusion. I had taken off my coat and rolled up my sleeve. There was no possibility to opiate at this moment, and no need of one, and so, without a moment's delay, we began the operation. After a time, it didn't seem a short time either, for the drawing away of one's blood, no matter how willingly it was given, is a terrible feeling. Van Helsing held up a warning finger. "Do not stir," he said, "but fear that with growing strength she may wake, and that may make danger, oh, so much danger. But I shall take precaution. I shall give hypodermic injection of morphia." He produced then, and swiftly and deftly to carry out his intent. The effect on Lucy was not bad, for the faint seemed to merge subtly into the narcotic sleep. It was a feeling of personal pride that I could see a faint tinge of color steal back into the pallid cheeks and lips of her. No man knows till he experiences it what it's like to feel his own life-blood drawn away from his veins into the woman he loves. The professor watched me critically. "That will do," he said. "Already?" I remastered. You took a great deal from art. You took a great deal more from art." To which he smiled a sad smile as he replied, He is her lover, her fiancé. You have much work to do for her and for others, and the present will suffice." When we stopped the operation, I attended to Lucy, whilst I applied the digital pressure to my own incision. I laid down, whilst I waited his leisure to attend me, for I felt faint and a little sick. By and by, he bound up my wound and sent me downstairs for a glass of wine for myself. As I was leaving the room, he came up after me and half whispered, "Mind, nothing must be said of this. If our young lover should turn up unexpectedly as before, no words should to him. It would be at once frightening and jealous of him too. So there's never be none. So!" When I came back, he looked at me carefully and then said, "You are not too much the worse. Go into the room and lie on your sofa and rest a while. Then have much breakfast and come here to me." I followed his orders, for I knew how tight and wise they were. I had done my part, and for my next duty it was to keep my strength up. I felt very weak, and in the weakness lost something of the amazement of which had occurred. I fell asleep on the sofa, however, wondering over and over again how Lucy had made such a retrograde movement, and how she had become so drained of so much blood with no sign ever anywhere to show for it. I think I must have continued my wandering in my dreams, for sleeping and waking my thoughts always came back to the little punctures in her throat and the ragged, exhausted appearance of their edges, tiny though they were. Lucy slept well into the day, and when she woke she was fairly well and strong, though not nearly so much as the day before. When Van Helsing had seen her, he went out for a walk, leaving me in charge, with strict injunctions as I was not to leave her for a moment. I could hear his voice in the hall, asking the way to the nearest telegraph office. Lucy chatted with me freely, and seemed quite unconscious of anything that had happened. I tried to keep her amused and interested. When her mother came up to see, she did not seem to notice any change whatsoever, but said gratefully to me, "We owe you so much, Dr. Stewart, for all that you've done. But you must now take care not to overwork yourself. You are looking pale. You want a wife to nurse and look after you. That you do." As she spoke to me, Lucy turned crimson, though it was only momentarily, for her poor wasted veins could not stand for long such a unwanted drain into her head. The reaction came in excessive pallor as she turned imploring eyes on me. I smiled and nodded and laid my finger to my lips. With a sigh, she sank back amid her pillows. Van Helsing returned in a couple of hours, and presently said to me, "Now you go home, eat much and drink enough. Make yourself strong. I stay here tonight, and I shall sit up with little miss myself. You and I must watch the case, and we must have none to other. I have given reasons. No, do not ask them. Think what you will. Do not fear to think even the most not probable. Good night." In the hall, 2 of the maids came to me and asked if they or either of them might not sit up with Miss Lucy. They implored me to let them, and when I said it was Dr. Van Helsing's wish that either he or I sit up, they asked me quite piously to intercede on the foreign gentleman. I was much touched by their kindness. Perhaps it was because I am weak at present, and perhaps because it was on Lucy's account that their devotion was manifest. for over and over again I have seen similar instances of women's kindness. I got back here in time for late dinner, went my rounds, all well, and then sat down whilst waiting to sleep. It is coming. 11th September. This afternoon I went over to Hillingham, found Helsing in excellent spirits and Lucy much better. Shortly after I arrived, a big parcel from abroad came to the professor. He opened it with much impressment, assumed of course, and showed a great bundle of white flowers. "Ah, these are for you, Miss Lucy." "For me, Dr. Van Helsing?" "Yes, dear, but not for you to play with. These are medicines." Here Lucy made a wry face. "Ah, nay, but they will not take in any decoration or nauseous form. But you will need not snub that so charming nose, or I shall point out to my friend Arthur, who at woes may have endured in seeing so much beauty he loves so much distort. Aha! My pretty miss, that brings so much nice nose all straight again. These are medicinal, but you do not know that how. I put them on your window. I make pretty wreath, and hang them round your neck, so that you may sleep well. Oh, yes, they, like the lotus flower, make your troubles forgotten. It seems like the waters of Lethe and of the fountain of youth that the conquistadors sought in the Floridas, and find him all too late." Whilst he was speaking, Lucy was examining the flowers and smelling them. She threw them down, saying with half laughter and half disgust, "Oh, Professor, I believe you are only putting on a joke for me. Why, these flowers are only common garlic." To my surprise, Van Helsing rose up and said in all sternness, his iron jaw set and his bushy eyebrows meeting, "No trifling with me. I never jest. It is a green purpose in all I do, and I must warn you that you do not thwart me. Take care, for the sake of others, if not for your own." Then, seeing poor Lucy scared, as she might well have been, he went on more gently. "Oh, little miss, my dear, do not fear me. I only do for your good. But there is much virtue in those so common flowers. You see, I place them myself in your room. I make them wreath, that which you wear. But hush, I tell no others to make so inquisitive questions. We must obey, and silence is the part of obedience. And obedience to bring you strong and well into the loving arms of that wait for you. Now, sit a while. Come with me, friend John. I shall help you deck the room with my garlic, all of the way from Haarlem, where my friend Vanderpoel raised herb in his glass house all year. I had to telegraph him yesterday, or they not would have been here." We went into the room, and taking the flowers with us. The professor's actions were certainly odd, and not to be found in any pharmacopoeia that I have ever heard of. First he fastened the window and latched it securely. Next, taking a handful of flowers, he rubbed them all over the sashes, as though to ensure that every whiff of air that might get in would be laden with the garlic smell. Then, with the wisp, he rubbed all over the jamb of the door, above, below, and at each side, and round up the fireplace at the same way. It seems grotesque to me, and presently I said, "Well, Professor, I know that you always have a reason for what you do, but this certainly puzzles me. It is well that we have no septic here, or he would say that you were working some spell to keep out an evil spirit." "Perhaps I am," he answered quietly, and he began to make the wreath which Lucy was to wear around her neck. We then waited while Lucy made her toilet for the night, and when she was in bed, he came and fixed the wreath of garlic around her neck. The last words he said to her were, "Take care you do not disturb it, and even if the room feels close, do not tonight open the window or the door." "I promise," said Lucy. "And thank you both 1,000 times for your kindness to me. Oh, what have I done to be blessed with such friends?" As we left the house in my fly, which was waiting, Van Helsing said, "Tonight I can sleep in peace, and sleep I want. 2 nights travel, much reading in the day between, and much anxiety. All throughout the day follow, and a night to sit up without to wink. Tomorrow in the morning early you will call for me, and come together we shall see a pretty miss so much more strong for my spell to have worked. He seemed so confident that I, remembering my own confidence 2 nights before, and with the baneful result, felt awe and vague terror. It must be my weakness that made me hesitate to tell it to my friend, but I felt it all the more, like unshed tears.